Previously, at Vanity Fair summary, there has been not much going on, and the narrator apologized for this. I am Sung, your host today, and I will be exploring the next chapter, chapter 6, with you. In this chapter, the story resumes with the party of Josh, Rebecca, Osborne, Amelia, and Otbin, all crowd into a coach and head to Vauxhall. Everyone in the coach believes that Josh is about to propose to Rebecca soon. Josh's parents have mixed feelings about this possibility. While Mrs. Sedley thinks that Rebecca is beneath Josh, Mr. Sedley feels that Josh should do whatever he wants. When the party gets out of the coach, Josh takes Rebecca's arms, Osborne takes Amelia's arm, and Dobbin walks alone. Poor guy. Walking at a slight distance behind the couples, Dobbin feels that Amelia is worthy of his good friend Osborne, and they look happy. Though the couples promised to stay together the whole evening, they soon severed, with the intention of all meeting again for supper. Eventually, Rebecca finds herself walking with Josh through a solitary area and feels certain that this is the decisive moment where he'll decide whether or not to propose to her. Rebecca says how much she'd like to see India, but just as Josh's about to answer, a bell rings for fireworks and people start rushing by. When everyone meets for dinner, Dobbin notices that there are only 4 places sitting at the table. Feeling that he is unwanted, Dobbin makes an excuse to leave and go walking on his own. Poor guy. At dinner, Josh orders a lot of alcohol, and since no one else drinks it, he gets extremely drunk. Osborne starts getting upset of how drunk Josh is, and when Dobbin comes back, Osborne asks him to take care of Josh while Osborne takes the ladies back to the coach. Osborne takes Rebecca and Amelia home while Dobbin takes care of the drunken Josh. Rebecca thinks that perhaps tomorrow Josh will propose to her. The next morning, however, Josh has a big hangover. He learns that he got into a fight and punched a coachman. Meanwhile, Osborne complains to Dobbin that Josh has embarrassed him, and things will get even worse if he decides to marry a low-born governess. The next day, Sambo comes to Rebecca and Amelia with a letter from Josh. In the letter, he asks Rebecca to forgive him and forget everything he said while drunk. Poor Rebecca. Rebecca goes up to cry. Everyone in the house except Amelia begins to feel that it is time for Rebecca to leave. When it is clear that Rebecca is leaving, Amelia collects some of her old things as gifts, as parting gifts for Rebecca, and asks Mr. Sedley and Osborne to give Rebecca some money. Rebecca accepts the gifts, but secretly she believes that Osborne is the one who ruined her marriage prospect with Josh. Rebecca leaves as Amelia promises to love her forever. So this chapter has some very interesting themes. The first one is that class prejudice is an obstacle to love and marriages. This is the main theme of the chapter and a personal favorite. Mrs. Sedley and George Osborne's attitude towards the relationship of Josh and Rebecca is evidence of this discrimination. Rebecca is condemned for something out of her control, and that she is believed to be beneath Josh, even when Josh is the one who has made a scene in this chapter. Another theme is that inebriation and indulgence could lead to unwise decisions. If only Josh has not been very drunk, he could have proposed to Rebecca the next day. Everything was sort of perfect until that point where he became drunk and started a drunken brawl. And a chapter that I commented quite a lot is that good nature shines in the sun even when taken for granted. You know who I am talking about, right? I'm talking about Robin. Dobbin. Dobbin, even when clearly diminished and ignored, he did not complain and stayed loyal to his friend Osborne. He is the role model, creates a contrast between the hypocrisy of the upper class and the good heart of a poor man. And this is about this chapter. But I am kind of curious. Rebecca has her marriages with Josh ruined. And what will she do now? What will happen at the next chapter of her life? Can I connect to Wing, please? Our reporter for the 7th chapter. Wing, are you there?
Oh yes, I'm here. Ngọc Nguyên is here, and now I'm going to summarize the 7th chapter of the novel Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. This chapter is about Rebecca's first step into her new journey when she first met Sir Pitt Crawley. So after saying goodbye to Amelia and the Sedley family, Rebecca came to the Queen's Crawley and worked as a governess, and she would take care of 2 of Sir Pitt Crawley's little daughters. Queen Elizabeth once stopped at the Crawley in one of her processes for breakfast. That's what makes this place special. And when she stopped at the Crawley, she was so delighted with some special Hampshire beer that she erected Crawley into a borough to send 2 members to the Parliament. And from that day, this place has been called Queen's Crawley. However, it was no longer so populous a place by the lapse of time. Like on Becky's way to Sir Pitt Crawley place, she imagined him to be a good-looking man with luxurious clothes and a neat and clean appearance, since he is a baronet. But that is just before she actually met him. Rebecca arrived at his place on Great Gaunt Street. Then Sir Pitt Crawley opened the gates for them, but he looked so ordinary, like so poor and dirty, that both John the groom and Rebecca mistook him with the servant. They even ordered him to carry Rebecca's belongings. Then, not until having settled in the building did Rebecca realize that the man who opened the gate for her is actually Sir Pitt Crawley. So they talked together, and then Sir Pitt Crawley introduced Miss Tinker, and through their conversations, Rebecca find out that Sir Pitt Crawley is a stingy man, that he keeps every single farthing. Rebecca don't know if he is a good or a bad person, but he did not make the list of disguisedom. Then later that night, she spent the night on the same big bed with Miss Tinker, and she really wanted to know more about the Crawley family. But unfortunately, as soon as Miss Tinker lay down on the bed, she fell deep into sleep. So, in the morning, they woke up very early at 4 a.m. and went to the Queen's Crawley on a very crowded coach that they have to pay by themselves. That is what happened in chapter 7 of Vanity Fair, and through this chapter I can see that the comparison, the contrast between how people think about the upper class in the society and how they actually act out is kind of different from each other. And since since Rebecca think as a stereotype that Mr. Sir Pete Crawley will be a good-looking man with luxury clothes, but actually he's just an ordinary man, and that somehow show that deep in his soul, like he doesn't really show his identity, show his class through his appearance, and but when through the conversation, it shows that he is a stingy man, and like it's have close feeling, like a warm feeling, that like a family to each other. Like he is an easy person to talk to, and that is also what I like about this chapter. And now, after Rebecca come to this family, let's see how her next journey would be. So let's come to chapter 8 by Thảo. Let's connect to Thảo. Hello.
Thank you, Miss Nguyen, for your introduction. And now I am gonna introduce to you the chapter 8. So chapter 8 opens with a letter from Rebecca to Amelia. She expresses her sad feeling when she separates Amelia. Temporarily putting the sadness aside, Rebecca starts her cold trip to story with ridiculous Sir Pitt. She described the Crawley family dwells on Sir Pitt's cruelness and stinginess, very different from the manners of a baronet. Rebecca describes Sir Pitt as an old, stumpy, short, vulgar, and very dirty man in old clothes and shabby old gaiters, and he speaks with a country accent. Rebecca writes of his extreme frugality, how he takes her candle after 11 o'clock, and how he calls her a hussy. Then she changes our topic to Queen Crawley's mansion. The property at Queen's Crawley is not as run down as their townhouse, but she says the Crawley home is glum and old-fashioned. Back to Sir Pitt, he has two sons, Mr. Pitt Crawley and Rawdon Crawley, from the First Lady Crawley, and two daughters, Rose and Violet, from the Second Lady Rose Crawley, whom he married after the death of his first wife. The current Lady Crawley is the daughter of an iron worker from similar means as Rebecca. Rebecca is a governess in Crawley's family. She teaches the Second Lady Crawley's two white daughters. Becky continues writing about the dinner time with the Crawley family. She passes the evening reading boring political pamphlets while the family members entertain themselves by the light of a single candle. The eldest Crawley sons reads dismal sermons to the family every evening, while Lady Crawley is always knitting and Sir Pitt is frequently drunk. The letter ends here. Even though Rebecca feels sad about her separation with Amelia, the narrator supposes that it is good for Amelia because Rebecca is a complicated, clever woman. In addition, the narrator wants reader to remember that Vanity Fair is very vain, wicked, a foolish place full of fondnesses and pretensions. And at the end of the chapter 8, the narrator criticizes Rebecca Chap because she has laughed at those she finds ridiculous, though she has no respect except for prosperity. And in my opinion, this chapter contains a profound lesson, which is don't judge a book by its cover. First, about Sir Pitt, he is a baronet. However, his appearance is completely opposite of his status. He is rude and stingy. About Rebecca, it seems to me that the Crawley's family doesn't think that Rebecca is not a simple woman. As Crawley's little girl says, Lorna, of course she will, and I saw at a glance that I need not be afraid of that woman without knowing that Rebecca is cherishing the dream of entering the aristocracy. And besides that, the narrator also mocks at the early 19th century British society as greedy for fame and glory. So I'm really curious about the detailed information of Crawley's family. Can you show me the detailed information of this family is of the high rank that Rebecca desires to gain a position in it. So welcome, Miss Kim.
Okay, hi everyone. If you guys are interested in the biography of an aristocratic family, now follow me. I will help you to explore this high class. After the mentions of Rebecca's visits to Baron Fitz Crawley, Chapter 9 deals with the depiction of this family member. At the beginning of the chapter, Sir Fitz Crawley enjoys a love story and criticized his first wife and swore never to marry another of her sort. She died, and he married a beautiful Rose Dawson, but he got drunk too often and beat her. He lived in a debt incurred by his father, Walpole Crawley, who was also a drunk. Okay, and about his wife, Lady Crawley, once Rose Dawson. She is a tragic figure. She married Sir Fitz Crawley for his money and abandoned the man she loved, Peter Pert. She is scorned by the people in her new social rank because she was the daughter of an ironmonger, and she lost her old friends because they were not fit to be received by the women in her station. She used to be an attractive woman, but in her grief, she lost her beauty. Her look fading, her husband ignores her, and her daughters show her little affection. Okay, and her only friend is Pitt, the elder son of Sir Pitt. He is a proper, pious gentleman who wants to refine the estate. Fitz worked as his grandfather's secretary and foreign diplomat. He enters the diplomatic profession for a few years, but then he left and became more of a country gentleman. Later, he became involved in the Negro emancipation question and eventually served as a magistrate and active religious speaker. Okay, but in his family, Sir Pitt has a married, wealthy sister, Miss Crawley, who intends to split her money to the second son, Redden Crawley. After this chapter, we can see a main theme outstanding from this. This is vanity and bad habits of the high class and upper aristocracy. Okay, because this chapter focuses on the occupants and habits at Queen's Crawley. Not a single member of Crawley clan, all of the whom demonstrate various vice and vanity. Sir Pitt emerged as one of the most egregious characters, which benefit his role as a highest-ranking aristocrat at Queen's Crawley. Sir Pitt's first appearance in the novel as a dirty, belly literary man, wholly meeting basically or the reader's ideal of an aristocrat. Through Sir Pitt holds an inherited seat in Parliament, ostensibly making him a leader of all England. He is unable to make good things. Despite Sir Pitt's failure and death, he insists on making a show of his stature. The extremes are not limited to Sir Pitt. The younger Pitt Crawley is plumber and affected, insists on using French names for meals even while he looked down upon his aunt, Miss Crawley. And Redden Crawley generously give money to the servants, but all of this money comes from the wealthy aunt. And by illustrating the shortcomings of this aristocratic family is the author's criticism on the present high-class system. So this is also the thing in the chapter make impress on me when I read the detail about Sir Pitt, who never had a taste or emotion or encouragement. and was worth desert and soul, and yet he had drank honors and power. He drove in a golden coat, and in Vanity Fair he had a higher place than most brilliant genius or spotlight virtue. Obviously, the vanity of the aristocracy reflects on the model of this man himself. It shows that Gossamer comes with the emptiness that is in this class. Okay, so with such a complex family like this, how can Rebecca gain the goodwill to clean up the social ladder? Okay, Miss Love, I and other guys really want to listen to next development in the novel. I wonder you are willing to share it with us? Okay, now come to Miss Love.
Hi everyone, my name is Mai Lau. I know you're very excited now, so let's follow me. I'm gonna give you a short summary about the Rebecca's journey to conquer the family in chapter 10. Feeling alone as she begins her time as governess, Becky decides that her best option is to try to make her new position as comfortable as possible. She finds that Lady Crawley has little influence in her own house, so Becky makes little effort to win her goodwill. Why? She makes more effort with the daughters, Rose and Violet, realizing that they prefer not to learn too much from their governess. Meanwhile, Becky learns that Pete Crawley sees himself as something of a diplomat, so Becky always makes sure to compliment his French. Pete Crawley is impressed when Becky tells him about her family, although she leaves out many details, like the fact that her mother worked in the opera. He criticizes Becky for playing backgammon with Sir Pitt, believing it to be improper. But these backgammon games are an important way for Becky to win her employer's favor. Meanwhile, Rawdon, the soldier, rarely comes home. Miss Crawley, who lives alone with her large fortune, likes Rawdon but finds Pete Crawley weak, and Pete Crawley also dislikes Miss Crawley back, believing she is vain and not very religious. Pete Crawley, who went to Oxford, Rawdon grew up to be a dandy with a habit for starting duels, and Miss Crawley always paid his debts. Okay, chapter 10 of William Makepeace Thackeray's novel Vanity Fair explores several themes, including greed and ambition, vanity, and social class. Here's an analysis of these themes in that chapter. The first theme is greed and ambition. So, greed and ambition can drive a person to engage in a cunning and deceitful actions. Characters like Becky Sharp are driven by their ambition to climb the social ladder and acquire wealth and status. In this chapter, Becky may engage in deceitful actions to achieve her goals, manipulating people to her advantage. For example, her marriage to Rawdon Crawley, flirting and manipulating men, or she's involved in various financial schemes. The second theme is vanity. So vanity can lead to self-centeredness, superficiality, and a lack of genuine human connection. In chapter 10, characters may be shown in indulging in their vanity, whether through their extravagant lifestyles or their obsession with social recognition. Vanity can be a destructive force, causing individuals to prioritize their own desires and egos over more meaningful values and relationships. And the last theme is about social class. Social class can influence their actions and decisions. I know Becky Sharp, for instance, is an example of someone who, from a lower social class, who is determined to ascend the ranks of society. Meanwhile, Amelia sadly belongs to higher social classes but may struggle with the expectations and limitations placed upon them. So in my point of view, I'm impressed with the social class theme, believing that social class not only exists in the past but also in the present. When people struggle to step out of their comfort zone and do things to open a new horizon, to be someone totally different. To me, social classification is not something of negativity, but it's even a driver for us to make more effort and be better every day.
Oh, let's thank to our guest today. And I believe that you have very useful, very interesting information about the chapters 6 to 10. And that is the end for today's episode. Next week, we are going to explore further chapters of the novel. Thank you so much and stay tuned for the next newest information. Goodbye.